Jimmy Carter came out of nowhere to win the American presidency in 1976. Carter's presidency was highlighted by his historic success forging a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, and marred in the end by the Iranian hostage crisis. Though defeated for re-election, Carter left office with his reputation for high ethics and morality fully intact. I was proud to serve in his White House. Joining me right now is Stuart Eizenstat, President Carter's chief domestic policy advisor and author of the newly released President Carter, The White House Years. Just quickly, you live in the present, you write about the past. Jimmy Carter left office in 1981. Trump entered in 2017. That's 38 years separate, right? But here's the question. What's the difference between these guys? Trump
Well, I obviously
Carter.
didn't write the book to be anti-Trump. I've worked on it for 40 years. But let me put it this way. I'm going to tell you some positive things about Carter.
Okay,
and other
sure.
people make the decision about the relationship. Right. Carter held his office at the highest standard of ethics. He respected his Justice Department and even the independent prosecutor who happened to investigate Ham Jordan as chief of staff, never criticized him. He was a great consumer champion. He believed in conservation. And he really, I think, in many ways, did everything possible to raise the standard of the office. He passed all the ethics bills.
Yeah.
Ethics going in, gifts while you're in, the revolving door going out, Independent Counsel, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. All of these things, Chris, are still there. The inspectors general, the independence of the judiciary. So he stood for a very high standard. I'll let others decide how Trump relates.
Let's talk about something that made us all proud, and that's the deal between Israel and Egypt. Tell me, why do you think he was able to do something, bring peace between Israel and its strategic rival, certainly Egypt at the time, the one country that could make war with it effectively, and did so in '73? Why do you think that happened with him and it never happened before or since, that kind of confrontation? We brought both leaders together and got them together.
First, he was willing to break a lot of political China and take tough issues on, regardless of the politics. But here's what he did. He poured over intelligence reports about Begin and Sadat so he understood them. He took them to the Gettysburg battlefield to show them the costs of continued war. He negotiated for 13 agonizing days and nights personally over 20 drafts, and then, Chris, the last day, the 13th day, Begin had decided no more concessions, I'm leaving. Carter had a brilliant insight. He knew from the intelligence reports how much Begin loved his 8 grandchildren. He took photographs of himself, Begin, and Sadat, hand-wrote inscriptions to each of the grandchildren, walked over to Begin's cabin and handed it to him, as Begin literally had his bags packed ready to leave and go back, saying no more concessions. He saw the tears come in Begin's eyes as he went through each one of them. Begin said, Mr. President, I'll give it one more try. The rest is history. 40 years, that treaty has never been violated. It's central to Israel's security and to ours.
I'm so glad you were able to do that. You're part of all that. Let me ask you about the great little mystery I want to talk to you about. And we all talked about it back then. How did Reagan get a hold of Jimmy Carter's debate book? You put the book together with Bert Karp and David Rubenstein. It was a big book. Had to tell him how to approach the Reagan, what he's going to probably say, how he's going to attack you, how you're going to defend yourself. How'd that get in the hands of Reagan's debate people?
Well, first, I confirm in the book with an interview, one of 350 that I did, of Jim Baker, who was the campaign manager
for Reagan.
And Jim told me that William Casey, who was the overall chairman, had been with the OSS, the predecessor of the CIA during the war, came in a week before the debate, plopped down our debate book and said, I think you might want to look at this. And Baker said to me, you know, I wasn't sure, should I use it or not? And I said, I'm going to use it. We believe, and there's a book that's been out as well, it has Baker's fingerprints, it has Dave Gergen's fingerprints, files.
But who in the Carter White House, you write in the book, only 3 or 4 people had copies of that book. How did a copy of that book get out of the White House, out of the Carter White House?
According to the sources we have, Bob Dunn or Lori,
Bob was our trip director.
I know.
Right. And he was in with Corbett.
Lucy, who was the daughter of the governor who ran with John Anderson. They gave it to Paul Corbin, who was a labor organizer but had been arrested many times. And the thing is interesting, Chris, because it shows the enmity on the Kennedy side. He had been a Ted Kennedy supporter, and the Kennedy people were so opposed to us. He actually got that book, switched sides, handed it to
Casey.
and Casey did it to Baker.
Do you think you write in the book that President Carter thought that the fact that they filched that book from his staff, got it out of the White House, gave it to Reagan's debate prep people, had an influence in who won that debate?
Yes, there's
Carter
no question.
thought that.
I mean, obviously we had high inflation, Iran, and problems, but Chris, the thing is this. All the polls showed before the debate that we were ahead. After the debate, we dropped precipitously. And interestingly, even after the debate, we still were even going in the last weekend when Carter decided to come back and take one last look at Iran, and it caused the whole thing. But there's no question, they knew all of our attacks. When he said, there you go again.
Was it a dirty trick?
Of course it was. Yeah. And Baker indicates that
Great
it was.
stuff. I love reporting, and you've been our reporter tonight, Stu Eizenstat. I've been reading it. You're a really good writer, Stu. I didn't know this part about you. You're smart. You are a very fluent writer. It's a hell of a book, and it's got all this stuff in it. A lot of good detective work. President Carter, the White House years. Great education here, and it's great about it. A good Democratic president I was proud to work for.